Well, hello, grievers. Mandy here. Restorative Grief is all about creating easy access to healing, no matter where or who you are. That's why I want you to remember that if you want grief support beyond a podcast, our Patreon features monthly workbooks to accompany each episode, as well as a Discord channel for more private chats and occasional bonus content as well. Supporting this work with your finances means investing in your own wellness and the healing of others, and that in itself is an incredibly generous and restorative practice. The link to the Patreon is in the show notes, but reach out with questions, okay? Now, let's get on to this week's episode. Welcome back to Restorative Grief with Mandy Capehart. You are listening to episode 158, titled Celebrating 3 Years, the Evolution and Future of Restorative Grief. The last 3 years have been a whirlwind of education, grieving, excitement, connection, writing, and expansion within the offerings from Restorative Grief. This is the 3-year anniversary of the podcast, and there are many opinions about what an anniversary podcast episode should be. I promise I considered multiple ideas before landing on offering you a brief recap of why restorative grief matters as an approach, an offering, and an opportunity for every one of us to continue to pursue the language of grief and healing together. First, let's revisit the approach built into the restorative grief model. It's my own work, developed over years of education and anecdotal experience both in my life and my clients' lives. Restorative grief is based on an integrative mind, heart, body, spirit approach to healing work. This holistic understanding of our very important parts allows us to gather all of that scattered sensation in our bodies, hearts, minds, and souls when we grieve. Grief throws our entire personhood into disarray. In the restorative grief model, we are provided with options to explore that which lies ahead through a lens of alignment in every aspect of our being. It literally does not matter where we start. When we approach ourselves with awareness and openness towards strategies and techniques that support our cognitive, emotional, somatic, and spiritual needs, we are agreeing with our parts that something hurts and something deserves attention. Grief is not a journey we must begin and find an end to. We know that grief is an ongoing conversation in our lives, and the more we learn the language and the way grief shows up in our holistic parts, the more we will lessen the intensity and overwhelm of grief. Not because we make it smaller or we get used to grieving, but because we are equipped, prepared, expanded, and ready to embrace this natural and expected part of life instead of trying to insulate ourselves against feelings and healing work. The restorative grief model teaches us how to approach ourselves with softness, curiosity, and tenderness that we may not even believe we deserve until we are face to face with someone who validates our grief experience and helps us find a new way forward. Initially, I built the restorative grief model for my book. The 31-day guidebook by the same name is the story of my grief experience and different strategies and holistic approaches to me through my lens of faith that served my healing process for grief. There's a little bit of memoir storytelling within the book, but on the whole, this offering has been described as grief insurance. It's for you, not just a story about me. If you have been part of a faith community, you're familiar with the idea of a daily devotional. These are books with short letters, invitations, or stories into reflections and journaling meant to deepen our understanding of a faith practice. And my book is exactly that for grievers and people curious about grief. The language of grief is often limited to the 5 stages model that is ubiquitous in entertainment media, but lacks the nuance, depth, and experience lived by grievers. My book is an offering within that framework loosely so that it feels familiar enough to create safety while you begin the work of grieving with intention. Whether or not you are part of a faith community or practice, my book has opportunities to explore how grief is presented socially, culturally, spiritually, and personally. You can buy a copy of my book on Amazon or, of course, request a signed copy directly from me. And if you would benefit from a copy of the book but can't afford it right now, please reach out to me. The entire purpose of my grief offerings is to become an accessible resource for people living in care deserts. That means if you need the support, I will do everything appropriate and in my capacity to offer it. Beyond the book and the podcast is the Restorative Grief Project. This quiet and calm online group is hosted on Facebook with weekly journaling prompts, questions to engage in the group, and permission to simply witness what meaningful grief support can look like. Support groups are a phenomenal point of access for grief support when we feel isolated. If there are no physical face-to-face grief supports near you, or you feel awkward or uncomfortable attending, the Restorative Grief Project is a very low expectation space for you to practice grieving with an audience. If you're new to my work, then this is your first opportunity to find out that I believe strongly in the power of a witness for your story. When we grieve, we are searching for the words to describe the pain and weight of our experience, and often we do not realize we carry it without partnership until we say the painful thing aloud. We are not grieving alone, but if we remain isolated and withhold our honest experiences and stories, we will not experience the healing energy available from being seen, heard, and known. It is a common misconception that grievers must find a person who knows their exact loss or experience in order to relate or help them feel seen. Any grief professional working one-on-one with clients will tell you they have not experienced loss in the same way their clients have, and yet their clients report great levels of attunement and connection. So how is this possible? Well, our role as grief educators and counselors is not to tell you everything will be okay, but to model what it looks like to live amid grief-filled moments without imploding or falling silent. So whether you opt to join the Restorative Grief Project hosted on Facebook, or you consider one-on-one coaching with me, you are giving yourself the gift of connection and safety. No matter the type of grief we carry, we can find healing opportunities in relationship with others. Some of our most powerful moments can come from a silent witness remaining with us while we weep. They don't need to cry with us. They do not need to soothe us with platitudes, and they don't even need to have a background in grief education. Because we were created for relationship with one another, and healthy people generate safe connections. Think about the last time you were around someone that felt soothing and safe. That environment is available to you, whether you choose an offering from Restorative Grief Coaching or not. The last thing I want to talk with you about on this 3-year anniversary podcast episode are the opportunities lying before us as we move into year 4. I've enjoyed telling people that the majority of podcasts have fewer than 10 episodes, with nearly half of all new podcasts only making it to episode 3. My friends, this is episode 158. There have been a handful of additional bonus episodes, Patreon-only episodes, and live conversations as well. So technically, I'm well into season 4. So what could we possibly continue to build from here on out? Well, part of that is up to you. Since the beginning of the show, I've enjoyed a passionate and dedicated group of financial supporters backing me in this work and keeping these episodes on the air. Not only is there a lot of time invested in writing and producing a podcast, but the cost of putting it into the world is not free either. And maybe someday I'll get picked up by Lemonade Media or some other incredible podcast group. But for now, it's just little old me trying to keep beautiful you encouraged and engaged in your grief work. So maybe this season is the one where you partner with me as a financial supporter. Each episode has a corresponding workbook available to you that helps make each concept a little more concrete. I would love to say that I make a profit from all this work, but truthfully, I will be sharing these episodes no matter what. So your contributions just help me ensure quality productions for people who don't have access to grief support in their lives. Where a support group might be too intense, a podcast and a journaling workbook might be an incredibly accessible and safe approach to begin a person's grief work. Another opportunity that we have together in the coming year is to begin looking a little more intentionally at how grief affects us in our bodies and our communities. As I write this episode, we are still deep in the middle of a political presidential voting season. As for me, the grief in my body and my community is palpable. The sheer violence of the last decade is holistic as well. Heart, mind, body, and spirit, we are carrying burdens we were never meant to face alone. So, whether you decide to get the workbooks and come along on my guided journey, I want to invite you into the intentional and personal work of grieving in a more communal way in the coming year. Our individual internalized grief work is crucial. Don't get me wrong. If we are not settled and open to what surfaces within, then what surfaces around us is an immediately dysregulating experience. So, by doing our individual grief work from our stories to our present day losses to the anticipatory grief we're facing, we can strengthen our ability to support one another through ongoing communal grief events. And this matters significantly. We do not have the opportunity or the right to say, I'm too dysregulated to stay connected to what's happening around me. Events happening globally that do not directly impact my individual life absolutely impact me on a social, cultural, political, emotional, and economic level. And it's naive to believe otherwise. But it is often incredibly difficult to see how a collective grief experience impacts our individual lives when we are insulated from the direct impacts. We can be insulated from grief collectively through financial security, the color of our skin, the neighborhoods we live in, and so many other protective factors that we just don't comprehend or think about on a daily basis. Within those privileges and protective factors, we have a collective and individual obligation to understand what it means when we put ourselves on the line on behalf of someone else. It does not mean I'm centering myself in their grief story or trying to relate to something that just does not apply to me and my lived experience. But this is where witnessing and honoring the stories and the pain of another person matters. When we enter into a scenario that does not appear to directly affect us, we can begin to see the way our lives are interwoven with one another, no matter where we began life on this planet. We have an opportunity here to become so much richer and healthier collectively if we will allow our hands to intertwine with one another's and experience grief and life side by side, instead of remaining insulated and hiding away from the difficult, discomforting, dysregulating experiences that some of us live with on a daily basis. This is your opportunity to grow in getting uncomfortable and learn how much healing is available in that growth zone on the outside of what you've always known. And I think you can agree with me. I hope you can agree with me when I say that is really exciting. Season 4 of the podcast is here, and I am holding nothing back. My guests coming up this season are powerhouses of writing, speaking, creating, and healing. Every one of them is breaking down barriers and binaries, harmful narratives, and dismantling the fear of death that so many of us feel limited by on a daily basis. And while my interviews are lined up and handled for the year, my essays are not yet set. So if one of these sentences triggered a thought or inspired a question, this is your opportunity to craft part of the narrative of season 4 of the podcast. Please reach out and help me shape these stories into a tool that serves you well right where you are and equips you well for where you are heading.